Continuing a theme tonight, U.S. officials charged with safeguarding the election also contradicted President Trump in testimony, this time about mail-in voting. Top intelligence officials appearing behind closed doors told lawmakers they discount the possibility of foreign actors rigging elections by way of mail-in ballots, something President Trump has repeatedly said will happen, and that his Attorney General William Barr has seconded. In fact, President Trump was at it again today, warning of, quote, the greatest election disaster in history, and one of his top advisors, Stephen Miller, echoed that line as well.
Nobody who mails in a ballot has their identity confirmed. Nobody checks to see if they're even a U.S. citizen. Think about that. Any foreign national, talk about foreign election interference, can mail in a ballot, and nobody even verifies if they're a citizen of the United States of America.
Yeah, he's lying, keeping them honest. That's just not true. In states that already conduct mass mail-in balloting, voter ID is always confirmed, for instance, through signature matches or use of driver's license numbers. Also, most ballot envelopes have unique barcodes. There is another worry, though, and that's the U.S. Postal Service. The Washington Post reports that it's experiencing days-long backlogs after a top Trump donor, now running the agency, cut costs in areas including overtime pay and sorting machines. Some who work in the service fear this could hamper timely delivery of ballots. The Post also says some worry the Postmaster General could be tipping the electoral scales for his boss. That's concerning. In a statement, the Postal Service says the mail is not slowing down, and they called the idea that the Postmaster General would make decisions at the direction of the president, quote, wholly misplaced and off base. But we'll see. Here with their perspective, Tim Naftali, a CNN presidential historian and co-author of Impeachment and American History, and Van Jones, a CNN commentator and former special advisor to President Obama. So Van, these voter fraud claims by President Trump and his allies, they're false. Let's say that. Let's say it repeatedly. The sad fact, though, is that they could still have an impact on the election. And I want to note this because the DHS, which is monitoring foreign threats to this election, it is noting the following. Mail-in voting has already become an issue among partisan political voices, which makes it a target for threat actors to exploit, interestingly, what the president himself is doing. Tell us how concerned you are about the president interfering with the results of this election.
Look, it's very concerned. Look, these tweets on this topic become like termites eating into the floorboards of democracy. And the dangerous part is, once you undermine public confidence in the election, you undermine public confidence in the legitimacy of our government itself. That's how countries wind up tail spinning into civil wars and all kinds of stuff. You're messing with the fundamental safety and security of the country itself. And there is no reason to do that because we have mail-in ballots and absentee ballots all across the country. We've been doing it, for better or for worse, for a very, very long time. And there is zero evidence, no evidence, that there's any more fraud or abuse of that system than any other system. You can't even get the absentee ballot if you don't have the right idea. It comes directly to you. Look, those of us who live in places like California, this is literally insane talk. It makes no sense at all, but it's very, very dangerous.
And not to mention the experience of the U.S. military for decades. Tim, a sitting president has never done anything like, to the extent of what the president is doing right now, to attack public confidence in an approaching election in which he is, of course, taking part. Compare him to the tactics of President Nixon. How do they compare in terms of scale, extent, and damage?
Oh, there's no, I'm no great fan of Richard Nixon's domestic activities, but there is no comparison. We have no precedent of a presidential candidate predicting massive voter fraud in the advance of a presidential election. There is no precedent for this, and there's a good reason for it. Until Donald J. Trump, we've not had someone representing a major party who is willing to subvert the institutions of our democracy for the sake of his own political advancement. This is a big deal, and no one has done this before.
And it extends through a whole host of voter suppression efforts. Van, how should Vice President Biden and his campaign handle this in the run-up to the election now, right? Building confidence in the process, but also, if President Trump were to lose and refuse to concede, claiming a rigged election.
Well, listen, let's hope it does not come to that. I mean, I hope that the election results are so clear and so decisive that you don't have that situation. What I do believe is important is not just for Biden, but for all responsible political actors on both sides of the aisle to stick up for the legitimacy of our elections. You need to now be hearing from conservative voices, as you're beginning to hear. You need to hear from our veterans and others that our elections are sacred. They are well run. We Americans go from here around the world to monitor other elections. That's how good we are at elections, okay? And so we need to hear from the entire civil society to defend our elections from these kinds of smear attacks.
And we did, to be clear, see, after the president suggested delaying the election, you saw a rare bipartisan rejection of that, even Mitch McConnell saying no uncertain terms. This election will happen on November 3rd. Tim, fact is, wouldn't be the first time, if we get there, that you'd have a contested election in the U.S. I mean, we don't have to be very old to remember the hanging chads of 2000 in Florida, going all the way to the Supreme Court, and a very divided decision in the Supreme Court. Tell us what that taught us, because you do have a real challenge here, right? You have an election in the midst of a pandemic with more mail-in voting than you've ever had before, and maybe a system overwhelmed by it.
Now, let's keep in mind that we taxpayers paid for an investigation of the 2016 election. Some people may forget, although it's only been 2 years, that President Trump put together an effort led by Chris Kobach, former Secretary of State of the state of Kansas, to investigate what he claimed were 2.8 million fraudulent votes. What did they find? Nothing. So we've already investigated the nature of our electoral system, and our federal government did it, and it's a federal government led by Donald J. Trump, and they found nothing. You don't need to go back to 2000 or 1960 to see that though we don't have a perfect system, it's one that you can trust.
It's a good point. And reminder, it's really the states and localities that do the election, and they pushed back against the president's investigation on that false claim about 2016. Let's see if the system stands up to it this time. Tim Naftali, Van Jones, thanks to both of you.